Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Toomer Talk Show on Tuesday. Hi, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer. I am the host of the show. Now, gosh, over a year now, and I am a family medicine community health physician. I'm the founder of Total Weight Care Institute, and I'm also the founder of Your Light Wellness and Weight Care Group, which is a group of highly dedicated physicians who provide telemedicine, weight care throughout the United States. So if you're somebody who needs good care, compassionate care, definitely let me know. You can write to me at help@drtumor.com and I can connect you to what a physician in your state. But thank you for coming. If you're listening, listen, just tell me where you're listening from, say hello. And if you're watching later, put hashtag replay and still let me know where you're watching from. It's always nice to know where people are. Hello, Marcia from Barbados. So, um, so also, and if you're listening, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you hadn't already. I am trying to, gather as many uh, followers as possible. I'm very close to 1,000. I'm looking forward to reaching 1,000. So if you're listening and you're not already following me on YouTube, I really would appreciate it if you would. And also make sure you hit that little bell, and that will also let you know every time that I post a video so that you don't miss anything. And also, if you happen to miss a recording, you can actually find it there under the live tab on my YouTube channel. So hello, Ursula. Good afternoon. Hello from North Carolina. Hello, Brandy from my hometown. Hey, how are you? Nice to see you. So again, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer. I am here. This is Dr. Toomer Talk Show on Tuesdays, every Tuesday here, 6 o'clock Eastern, and with the replays on Facebook and on my YouTube channel under the live. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. So, and again, if you have any topics that you'd like me to talk about, I always answer questions at the end. So, or if you put questions in, just I'll try to catch them. And so, but at the end, I do like to answer questions. And but if you have any topics or questions that you have that you think of later, you can always write to me at help@drtumor.com and leave the questions there, and I will respond. Or if you write comments on any of the videos on YouTube, I do respond to those as well. So today's topic, I got some questions last week, sent to me last week about binge eating and why it happens, or basically it was just someone complaining about how they're having binge eating and they were having some difficulty. And now, and I noticed that everybody always blames themselves when this happens. And so I really wanted to talk about it. But first of all, I want to make sure there's a distinction. Binging and binge eating are two different things. Binge eating disorder is an actual diagnosis that is part of the psychiatric diagnoses, and it is something that's chronic that happens over many years, and there's a lot of very specific criteria that go into that diagnosis. I'm not talking about that. That requires therapy, it requires medication. There are some good medications. GLP-1s have been working really well to help with that. But that is a very specific diagnosis that I'm not going to talk about. There are specialists who deal with that. I can identify it, I can diagnose it, but when it comes to treating it, I usually call an expert in that field. Binging, however, is something different. What that means is you have this drive to keep eating something or just to keep eating in a given situation. It happens every once in a while. It is not a chronic thing, but it does happen. And generally when that happens, there's a few things that go on that can make it worse. And there's some things, a lot of things that can actually make it better. And so I wanted to talk about it because I hear about it a lot. And I hear a lot of self-blame around that. And that's why I wanted to highlight a few things so that, and generally what this means is that it's usually someone who eats sugar, like they'll eat a cookie, for example, and they just can't stop eating the cookies. or once they have the like cookies, they keep eating, or they keep eating sugar, and then for like a week they just are really driven to eat sugar all the time. Um, or it could be any food item, and so that can happen. I'm mostly talking about eating though, binging. There's other types, but I'm just going to talk about eating at this time. So essentially, what happens is when we binging is generally around carbohydrates or sugar, and sugar and carbohydrates. And the reason that happens is because there's an underlying metabolic dysregulation. Basically, what that means is that when you eat a carbohydrate or you eat sugar, our body just simply doesn't process it properly. And when our body doesn't process it properly, our brain starts missignaling and telling us to behave in a certain way that actually is counterproductive. And I'll get into the little bit of the science of that. But generally, anytime you do anything, anytime a human does anything, we can look at what's called a biopsychosocial process. We look at the biology, we look at the psychology, and we look at it socially and figure out what the causes of any of those three things could be. And then we address it based on those three things. And so biologically, what happens when we start eating sugar, eating carbohydrates, and we just simply can't stop? It's because we have an underlying metabolic dysregulation. We have an underlying genetically predisposed issue with how our body metabolizes carbohydrates / sugar. And what our body does is that it doesn't allow for the blood sugar to get into the cell, into our brain cells, so that our brain can then send the right signals to the rest of the body. And one of the things that happens when blood sugar gets into our brain is that it sends a signal to stop eating. It sends a signal saying it's got its food, it's got its drug, and it doesn't need any more, so you can stop. But often what happens for those of us who have dysregulation is that when our blood sugar goes up, our insulin levels go up. And when our body can't utilize that insulin properly, which goes along with glucose dysregulation or carbohydrate dysregulation, when it goes up, it can't be used by the brain. And when it cannot be used by the brain, the blood sugar can't get into the cell. And the brain sends a signal, eat more. And the more you eat, the higher your insulin goes. The higher your insulin goes, the higher insulin resistance happens. And insulin resistance means that insulin can't be used, that glucose doesn't get into the cell, and the brain starts missignaling. And so it constantly makes you crave more sugar, crave more starches, crave more carbs. That's what happened. And so that's what the binging is. It's our brain missignaling because our brain is predisposed, our cells have been predisposed to metabolic or carbohydrate or glucose dysregulation. And so that's the biology of it and why it happens. And how you stop that is through prevention. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. You address the insulin resistance, the glucose dysregulation head on. And the ways you do that is by going after what causes it and what makes it worse. Well, genetic causes it, but you can't do anything about your genetics, so you can block it in other ways. And so what you do is you make it not worse. And by doing what you do is you regulate your insulin levels. And you regulate your insulin levels by keeping your blood sugar levels stable. And the best way to keep your blood sugar level stable is by managing stress, by growing muscle, and with your meals. So, muscle, meditation, mindset, and meals. And so when I talk about meals, what I mean is your meals should be primarily protein and fiber, which is basically meat or of some type, and vegetables. And you can still have the carbohydrates and you can still have the starches, but it should be in small amounts. You should avoid any of the what are called simple carbohydrates, like rice, white bread, white flour, potatoes, sugar. When you eat those things, it's triggering. And when your body gets triggered, your body starts to spiral. And when your body spirals, that is binging. And so to prevent that, what you do is either avoid those things altogether, if you can, or which isn't really realistic because, there's flour and things. There's, potatoes are nice. And, every once in a while you want to have some sugar. That's fine. But the way you do it is you never eat it by itself and you never eat it first. Always prime your body, get your body ready for any type of carbohydrate by eating protein and fiber first. And when I say carbohydrates and sugars, that also includes breads in a meal. That also includes beverages, sugar beverages, wines, beer. And so it's really important that the order in which you eat your food will help prevent that. And then the amounts that you eat of those things also helps prevent it. And so order, content. That's it. An amount. It's not, and I'm not saying starving. When I say amount, I don't mean like shrink the amount you eat. It's just that whatever carbohydrates you eat should be the least of whatever it is at your meal. And the reason this is so important is because the ramifications are far more than just physical. It does make your blood sugar go up. It does make your insulin levels go up. And it does make you want to eat more sugar. But what that also does is it makes your body lay down fat. That is how we make fat in our body. And when our body makes fat in our body becomes a hormone organ of its own. It actually causes inflammation. It causes hormonal disruption. It causes pain, and it causes organ inefficiency. When you have especially weight gain through the middle, your organs just simply don't work as well. So your overall health is just badly affected. So it's not just that it's binging, it's a terrible thing. It actually does affect your health, and that's why it's important to address it. If it didn't affect your health at all, it wouldn't matter, but it does. But the other is the psychological impact. When you have a process and you start beating yourself up about it, it changes what you say to yourself, how you say things to yourself, and that also starts a vicious cycle. So we talked about the bio. Now we're talking about the psychosocial. The psychological impact of binging really does make us judge ourselves very, very harshly. Partly because it's a compulsion. It's hard to stop. It's like an addiction. Not only that, but also it can be very obvious to people around us. And so they make comments as well. And that's part of the social. But the psychological impact can have long-term ramifications because it starts also another vicious cycle of mean talk to yourself. And when the biggest bully that our body reacts to is ourselves. It reacts to being bullied. Our body reacts to mean things being said to us. And it doesn't matter if that mean thing is coming from us or somebody else. So when we're down on ourselves, we're hard on ourselves because of some process that really we can't control all that well. It's really being controlled by a physiologic drive, but we're blaming ourselves for it. Again, it starts that cortisol reaction, that stress reaction. And when you have a stress reaction, that drives your blood sugars up even higher. It drives your insulin up even higher. And it just starts, again, another vicious cycle. And so that's really hard to break. And it's easier to stop before it starts than to try to reverse it once it has started. But that, again, is the psychological. So how you prevent that and how you stop it is by getting your stress down. And you get your stress down in a couple of ways. The most immediate way is to actually go after the cortisol levels. You drop the cortisol by doing things that help lower it. Pilates, going for a walk, great gratitude journaling, deep yoga breathing. Those are all things that help bring down your cortisol. And then the intermediate is that you try to stop the effect that it's having on you. And so that's therapy, sometimes medication. And then the long term is you remove the stressor altogether. Sometimes we can't do that, especially if it's a family member that we're supposed to love. So essentially, the best thing to do is then just block the effect it has. And then and so in dropping your cortisol and dropping your stress levels, then you can help with the psychological effects of what's happening. And then the social, I mean, obviously, when you're in a situation where you are triggered either by sugar or something else, particularly when you're in a party situation like birthday parties and all the rest, the way you stop it from happening there is you plan. You just pause and plan. So if it's something that you can't plan for, it happened out of the blue, you just basically hold off until you can get to a place or to a space where you can behave in a way that's preventative by eating protein beforehand, by eating some type of healthy fat, by eating some type of fiber, and then having that sugar or whatever it is that can trigger you. And then the other is, and then so that you can enjoy yourself. It doesn't become the center of conversation. It doesn't become very obvious to people around you. When everybody's all in your business and all in your plate and all in your process, it's really, really hard not to get defensive. It's very hard not to feel self-conscious. It's very hard to sort of stay calm. And so it's also so being in a situation where you pre-plan kind of keeps people out of your business because then it's not as obvious to them as to what's going on and what you're doing. And anybody who has ever eaten or bought Girl Scout cookies knows what this can do. And so obviously the best way of to stop this is to prevent it. If you know you have triggers, then just avoid them. I know personally, I do not buy Oreos. I cannot just eat one. I eat one or two, and my blood sugar shoots up, and it drives the process of me to keep eating them. For some reason, other carbs don't do that. Pasta is another one that will do that. Rice will do that, and so will Oreo cookies, Girl Scout cookies. I mean, just things that are sugary. Um, but avoiding the things or making sure you have a mechanism around mitigating what they can do. Again, so biopsychosocial, always think that biologically, this is a metabolically driven process. Binging is not a weakness. It's not a lack of discipline. It's not a lack of willpower. It is your brain, which is the most powerful organ in our body, driving a process based on your genetics. So the best way to stop it is to prevent it. But once it's started, then what you can do is avoidance. And another is water, drinking lots and lots of water. And then the other, because what that does, it also dilutes the sugar in your system. So when you dilute the sugar, it stops the signaling from misfiring. And then again, avoidance, and then having a plan. Because when you don't plan to fail to plan. So wait, that's not right. But if you fail to plan to fail. There you go. That's it. So again, I'm Dr. Catherine Toomer for those of you who are just tuning in. And if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. If you think of topics later that you'd like to talk about, you can always send them to me at help@drtoomer.com. You can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That is actually one of the best places to get information that I talk about. And make sure you subscribe. Send this to your friends. Send it to family who you think might benefit from this because, and then have them follow as well. But hello, everyone from all over, saying hello from all these different places. This is wonderful to see. So Jerry says, I'm new to your channel. Are there any tests we can take for doctors that will help what foods do and don't work with our specific metabolic state? Okay. Essentially, any metabolic issue you have is always around carbohydrates and blood sugars. That's it, because our body only uses carbohydrates and blood sugar mainly for fuel. It either uses it for fuel for our muscles or fat, or to grow fat to store for energy later. So all of our energy, all of our metabolism uses carbohydrates and starches. So you don't need a test for that. Now, what you can test for is what foods will drive up your blood sugar. And even that is not so much a test. Continuous glucose monitoring can tell you what you can and cannot eat, but we pretty much already know carbohydrates and starches drive up your blood sugar. So if you react to those things. So the best test, though, to find out if it's an ongoing problem for you is what is an A1C, which is a hemoglobin A1C. And what that tells you is about the average of your blood sugars over the last 3 months. But the most specific test is called a glucose tolerance test. And what that is you go in, some people, doctors order it where you go in fasting, they check your blood sugar, they give you something really sugary to drink, and then an hour later they check your blood sugar, and then sometimes 2 hours later. They usually do this in the 2-hour one in pregnancy at 20 weeks, because pregnancy is a metabolic disruptor. So you always check for diabetes in pregnancy. However, what I like to do is I don't like checking fasting blood sugars first. I don't have people fast when they do their labs, mainly because the way we eat is we stack our eating. We eat breakfast or eat one time, then we eat again, then we eat again, then we eat again. So we don't fast between every single meal. So you want to know what your body does when you've eaten on top of eating. So a non-fasting 1-hour glucose tolerance test will tell you what your body does, how well your body metabolizes the one thing that causes our blood sugar to go up, our fat production. The other is a glucose tolerance test for blood sugar, but also to test for free insulin. And that test will let your doctors know if you have insulin resistance, if you're pre-diabetic, or even if you're diabetic. And that will but everyone's body does the same thing with blood sugar. It either makes fuel or makes fat. So if you're somebody who gains weight very easily, have a lot of difficulty losing weight, you notice you get very irritable, either before you've eaten or just after. If you notice your mood changes with food, particularly gets very irritable after eating something sugary, then you probably have metabolic dysregulation. And that is why GLP-1 medications work so well. Yes, they were designed for diabetes, but glucose dysregulation is at the low end of the same continuum as diabetes. So that's why they work to help with weight loss. It stops your body from making fat in those situations, and it helps reverse it. So, Sherry, I hope that answers your question. If you have another, that's fine. You can just put it in the chat. But yeah, your everyone's metabolism is the same, where that is where our body makes food, fuel or fat is concerned. Pamela, cortisol and air travel, how do you manage it? So if you know that air travel makes you anxious or kind of gives you stressed, one, time management. Give yourself enough time to travel. So yes, it may mean sitting in the airport a little bit longer. It may mean, but it gives you time to not rush. Rushing is a cortisol raiser, meaning it raises your cortisol to rush. So giving yourself time. The other thing is, if you're a nervous traveler, then learning how to, with biofeedback. Deep yoga breathing is one. And the way you deep yoga breathing, there's lots of YouTube channels on how to do that. And you could take a deep breath, you hold it and you let it out very slowly. And you keep doing that as you relax your shoulders, as you relax your muscles, as you relax. And like I said, there are many videos on that. And if it's really, really severe, the only way is then with medication. And that's usually with either muscle relaxants or some type of anti-anxiety medication. Niece said, I had a piece of birthday cake and immediately felt guilty. I lost 78 pounds on a GLP-1. Is this normal behavior? Yes, it's normal behavior because we've been told that you should feel guilty. However, it's not, oh, it's okay to eat birthday cake. The problem isn't eating the birthday cake. The problem is if you eat a birthday cake and then you can't stop. And it's not even your problem, it's a problem with your metabolic process. So if you can eat a piece of birthday cake and and that's it, then don't worry, then you had a piece of birthday cake. Food should not be tied to emotions unless it is to make you happy. As far as I'm concerned, food is a self-care mechanism. It is designed to nourish our bodies, to give us pleasure. And if you get pleasure in moderation, then that's fine. And good for you for losing 70 pounds on GLP-1. What that means is simply that you had an underlying metabolic issue and the GLP-1 corrected it. And that's what reversed your weight. You cannot have that kind of weight loss without something being treated. And what was being treated was the reason you gained weight in the first place. So, does your weight loss practice accept insurance? No. And the reason is that I like to spend a lot of time with my patients, anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Insurance doesn't pay for that. I wouldn't be able to afford to practice if I did take insurance. However, I do try to do as much as I can with insurance, meaning that when I prescribe medications, I try to make sure it's through insurance, if your insurance covers it. When I send lab orders, I send it so that insurance can cover it. Health savings accounts and the FSAs, I forgot what the F stands for, federal savings accounts. If you have those, you can use them to pay. All I have to do is write a letter of necessity, and that you can use it to buy medications. You can use it to pay for memberships, for my membership, which is basically how I practice in membership. It's a one-on-one and group. So I have weekly group meetings every Tuesday, again on 7:30, and then I have one-on-ones every month. And so I try to do as much as I can through insurance, but I personally, what I do is not covered, because I can't, because of the amount of time I spend with people. Yolanda said, will the anti-anxiety medication interfere with bupropion? No. In fact, bupropion is an antidepressant that often conducts secondary work on anxiety, and usually they work well together. And it also depends on the type of anti-anxiety medicine. There are anti-anxiety medicines that are habit forming, and usually try to avoid them if we can, because you can become physically dependent on them. And so there are anti-anxiety medications that are not habit forming, and usually they work very well with antidepressants like bupropion. Yeah, so usually they don't interfere, but it's, make sure that when you're talking to your physician, it's somebody who understands the medications well enough to understand whether they are interactive or not. Is ashwagandha good for managing cortisol stress? Yes, it is. It's also good for helping with sleep. Helps with mood. The most important thing with ashwagandha, however, is making sure you have a pure form. The problem we run into with supplements, because it is considered a supplement, is that it's not regulated. And so sometimes you can have people selling something that is mostly filler agent and not ashwagandha, and you have no way of knowing. Now, there's some companies like Nature's Made and Nature's Bounty have had their products independently tested. And so you can, and then there's also independently testing you can pay for yourself. It can be kind of pricey, so I wouldn't recommend it. But if Nature's Made and Nature's Bounty are the only two that I would recommend at this point, because they're the only ones I know of that have been tested, and their ashwagandha is, so when I use any products, or if I use ashwagandha, that's where I use their products. However, now the thing with ashwagandha though is that it can make you very sleepy, and for some people who are very sensitive to medication, it can carry over into the next day. So you want to start with the lowest dose possible, and then kind of see how you react and respond to that. But yes, ashwagandha does lower cortisol. But the thing is, though, is that what it does, it helps relax you to the point where then you can do something. It doesn't work on its own. You still have to create the environment where it can work. So you have to still pay attention to the things that are triggering. You still have to pay attention to the things that cause you stress and start focusing on either reframing it so that they don't bother you as much, or you look at it differently, or you get some type of therapy to kind of understand why things are the way they are. So it's not a magic pill, but it does help. Um, any other questions? I can hear my puppies. Well, I call them puppies, even though they're almost 5 years old and they're 70 pounds, but they're starting to bark. But so I don't know. I don't think you can hear them, but if you can, that's them in the background. So any other questions? So what I would recommend is, again, go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and then Um, and then you can and follow me there. You can ask me questions under any of the videos that you have questions about, and you can email me at help@drtumor.com as well. That's always being monitored. So, sure, you asked what, sorry, can I name the brands again? Nature's Bounty and Nature's Made are the two. There are others I'm sure that are very good, and I haven't stayed on top of the testing. So if you go online and you can look up which ones have been tested, um, and not based on the company telling you they tested, but the testing companies telling you they tested, because anyone can claim in their advertising that they've had it independently tested, and usually you don't know what that means. None of us know what that means. So just finding the ones that there is a US. I don't think it's USDA. It's a US something, but it basically is a government agency that does testing. Okay. Well, if you have no more questions, I don't like to keep you too long, but I will be back next Tuesday for the Dr. Tumor Talk Show. And again, if you have any topics that you'd like me to talk about, you have questions, you can always write to me at help@drtumor.com, and I will incorporate them. So I want to say good night and have a wonderful Tuesday evening, and I will see you next week.